My wife thought I would never find out, but karma always has its way of arriving at the right time. That night, I should have paid more attention to the signs. It didn't feel like an ordinary night. I was sitting in our living room watching TV when I heard the shower running again. It was Yuli's third shower that day, which felt unusual because she was never someone overly concerned with cleanliness. Normally, she would shower once a day or twice if we had plans. But 3 times? That felt out of place. I tried to focus on the television, but something kept pulling my attention away. The laugh track from the sitcom I was watching fell hollow, almost mocking. I lowered the volume and just sat there, listening to the sound of the water running through the pipes. Something in the air felt different that evening. Heavier, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. The water was still running when I noticed her shoulder bag on the chair near the dining table. It looked messy, as if it had been hurriedly opened. The zipper was undone, and some of its contents had fallen out. Lipsticks, receipts, and small accessories scattered across the floor. I'm not the kind of person who checks my wife's belongings. To me, that crosses a boundary in a marriage. Trust had always been something I considered sacred between us. We had built 8 years together on what I believed was a solid foundation. A shared apartment, a shared life, shared dreams we used to talk about on quiet Sunday mornings. I had never once felt the need to question her. But seeing the mess, I thought I would simply help tidy it up before she finished her shower. It was a small gesture, the kind a husband does without thinking. As I picked things up, I found myself wondering why there were so many similar items that, to me, looked almost the same. Lipsticks in nearly identical shades. Small bottles of perfume I didn't recognize. A receipt from a boutique in a part of the city she had never mentioned visiting. Then my hand brushed against something unfamiliar. It was a small metallic object, cool to the touch, with a sleek and refined design. I held it under the light. A slim silver tube, about 10 centimeters long, minimalist and elegant. It looked almost too carefully chosen, too deliberate to be something ordinary. The surface was covered in Chinese characters. At first, I assumed it might be something medical, perhaps something she hadn't told me about. We had been drifting apart quietly over the past year, and I had convinced myself it was just the natural rhythm of a long marriage. People get busy. People get tired. I had accepted that as the explanation for everything. But that raised more questions. Why in Chinese, and why keep it hidden? Curiosity got the better of me. I used my phone to translate the text. When the result appeared, I felt a chill run through me. It was a personal care product, clearly intended for someone else, not for use in our relationship. It wasn't new. It had clearly been used before. We rarely used anything like that, and when we did, it was something simple from a pharmacy. This was different. More expensive, deliberately sourced, and clearly not meant for our relationship. Someone had gone out of their way to find it. I set it down carefully. My hands were steady, but my mind was spinning. As I stood there, trying to process everything, my eyes shifted to Yuli's tablet on the table. The screen was still on, its glow soft in the dimly lit room. Normally, I would have looked away. Normally, I would have reminded myself that privacy mattered, that respect was the cornerstone of what we had. But nothing felt normal anymore. There were neatly organized folders labeled with simple names like fun stuff, work tools, and groceries. For a moment, I almost smiled at how ordinary it all looked. How carefully arranged. How deliberate. Curious, I opened one of them. Inside was an app one didn't recognize, a messaging application. It had a plain icon, designed to look like something unremarkable. Easy to overlook, easy to hide in plain sight. I opened it. Messages appeared instantly. At the top was a conversation with someone named Ray. The timestamps showed messages sent at hours I recognized well. Hours when I was at work, hours when she told me she was resting, hours when I thought we were simply living parallel but connected lives. Can't wait to see you on Thursday. I already booked our usual apartment in Sagulong. Bring what you know I like, the silver one. It makes everything better. I'll give you what your husband can't. I read the message twice, then a third time. I scrolled through more messages. Weeks of conversations, meetings, photos, details I wished I had never seen. It wasn't a single mistake or a moment of weakness. This had been carefully planned, consistently maintained, and deliberately hidden. There were inside jokes between them. There were references to places they had visited together. There were messages that spoke of a familiarity so deep it felt like a second life. One she had been living right alongside ours. Everything started to make sense. Every overtime, every night out with friends, every time she said she was too tired, every canceled dinner plan, every short answer, every moment I had quietly forgiven without question because I believed in us. I had handed her my trust completely, and she had used it as cover. The shower was still running. Yuli was humming softly, as if nothing had changed. That sound, so familiar, so ordinary, suddenly felt like something I was hearing for the very first time. My hands slowly stopped shaking. I placed the tablet back exactly where it had been. I returned the silver tube to the bag and zipped it closed. I straightened the chair. Then I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a drink, trying to steady my thoughts. I stood at the counter in the dark for a long time, staring at nothing. I had two choices. I could confront her right now, in the heat of everything I was feeling, or I could wait and be smarter than my emotions. If she wanted to play this game, I would respond in my own way. I chose to wait. The night continued. Later that night, Yuli came out of the bedroom looking refreshed, her hair still slightly damp. She moved through the apartment with the ease of someone who had done nothing wrong. She offered me a drink, as if nothing was wrong, asking casually about my day, commenting on the weather. I answered briefly, smiled when it seemed expected, and pretended to fall asleep on the couch not long after. I kept my breathing slow and even. Around 12:30, she quietly left the house. The door closed with a soft click, the kind of careful, practiced sound that told me she had done this many times before. I waited a few minutes, then followed her. The city at that hour had a strange stillness to it. Streetlights reflected off empty roads. I kept a careful distance, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice, close enough that I wouldn't lose sight of her. At an apartment complex in Sagulong, I saw her meeting someone near the entrance. A man, tall, well-dressed, clearly comfortable in that space. The way someone looks when they consider a place their own territory. Ray. They exchanged a few words I couldn't hear, and then went inside together. The lobby lights framed them briefly before the elevator doors closed. From a distance, I watched, my mind racing with everything I had discovered earlier. I stood on the pavement outside, beneath a flickering streetlight, and I let the full weight of the evening settle over me. There was grief in it. There was anger. But more than anything, there was a strange, quiet clarity, the kind that only comes when you finally stop pretending. She had brought the silver bottle, the same one I had already tampered with earlier that evening, while she was still in the shower. Not long after, there were raised voices from somewhere above. Even from where I stood, the tension was audible, sharp, escalating, unmistakable. Panic followed. The situation quickly escalated into something serious. Within the hour, emergency services arrived at the complex. I watched from a distance as the scene unfolded. I did not intervene. I simply watched, and I remembered every detail. The night that was meant to be secretive turned into an emergency, one that neither of them had planned for. The next day, Yuli returned home in the early morning hours, looking pale and unwell, moving carefully, trying to act as though the night had been unremarkable. She went straight to the bedroom without a word. I said nothing. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I looked out the window at the morning light coming through the curtains, and I made my decision quietly, without drama, without confrontation. Not yet, but I had already made my decision. In the days that followed, I began gathering everything carefully and methodically. I made copies. I documented timelines. I spoke with people I trusted. I took note of names, places, and patterns that extended far beyond what I had initially discovered on that tablet. The more I looked, the more I found. This was not simply a personal betrayal. There were layers beneath it that surprised even me. Days later, I began putting everything into motion. Eventually, the truth came out, not just about the unfaithfulness, but about other activities that Yuli and Ray had been involved in together. Financial arrangements that didn't add up. Transactions that pointed toward dishonest activity on a scale I had not anticipated. People connected to them who were also implicated. There were arguments, denials, and finally admissions. The situation grew bigger than I had expected. What had begun as a personal discovery on an ordinary Tuesday night had quietly unraveled into something far more complicated. There were connections, hidden activities, and more people involved than I had ever imagined when I first stood in that living room, holding a silver tube under the light. I reported everything to the authorities, the messages, the documentation, the financial irregularities. I presented it all clearly and let the evidence speak for itself. Within days, an investigation began. Assets were frozen. Several individuals were questioned. The comfortable life that had been constructed so carefully around those secrets began to collapse, piece by piece. Ray lost everything he had built. his business, his reputation, his freedom. The things he had been so confident about, the things he had spoken about so boldly in those messages, were gone. Yuli, too, faced the consequences of her choices. There were no more performances of normalcy, no more carefully rehearsed explanations. The truth had its own momentum, and once it started moving, nothing could slow it down. Weeks later, another incident brought everything to a close. Additional evidence surfaced. Further individuals came forward. The authorities intervened at a broader level, and the final pieces fell into place with an almost quiet finality. In the end, both of them faced legal consequences for what they had done, not only to me, but to others who had been affected along the way. I sat alone in our apartment on the evening it was all concluded, looking at the chair where her shoulder bag had been sitting just weeks before. The zipper neatly closed now, the chair empty. And just like that, everything was over. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved exactly. What I felt was something simpler and harder to name. The quiet that comes after a long storm, when the air is finally still and you realize that whatever comes next will be entirely your own.